Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Today we're talking about frequency healing. Are you one of these people who've heard about this? If you've been watching my show, you will have seen numerous people come on and tell us how frequency and vibration is the new way forward. It's something that perhaps has been around for over 100 years and has been discovered and then forgotten about as we've gone down the nefarious, pharmaceutical, maybe I should say, route to health. But of course, there are other means to achieve wellness and good health. And frequency is very much paramount at the moment in people's minds. People are talking about it. It's not fully understood. I can't claim to understand it fully myself. But I was sent a very lovely book called Frequency Healing, helped there by the title, and it is a fascinating read which you may find useful yourself. So I thought it would be a good idea to get the author, Michael Upstone, to tell us a little bit about frequency healing, what it does, how we can obtain it, and a bit about how and why he wrote the book. And he joins me now. Good afternoon to you, Michael.
Hi, Richard. Good to meet you.
It's lovely to meet you. Now, this is an area which I have had a few guests on to talk about, frequency healing, and it's a lot to get your mind into because there's so many good things about frequencies. People talk about ringing baths or sound baths. That's the word I'm looking for. They talk about the old days with the bells that used to send out frequencies. And of course, I've had people on who have devices like John White from Spooky 2, who I interviewed recently, and he talks about, and his device is about scalar energy, but there's rife frequencies and all sorts of stuff. It is a bit of a minefield, so I hope you're going to be able to help myself and the lovely viewer through and tell us a bit about frequency healing.
I'd be delighted to do that, Richard. Yeah, part of the problem is that this area is absolutely going bananas. It's forecast to grow tenfold over the next 10 years. So it's very much like the early days of digital imaging, and a lot of people are going to be doing this in the next few years. But it's an absolute minefield, as you've said. The moment you step into the area, you get bombarded by memes, by words and phrases, names like Reich, Rife, Tesla, scalar, all sorts of different things like that. What does it mean and how does it work? And how do
Yes.
all the different devices work as well, and what do they offer? So this is really what's explained in the book, as well as beginning with really some examples of people, but also images and x-rays of bone regeneration and things like this. So this is the next step, is after energy healing, which I would personally define as quick repair, very, very fast results on, burns, on cuts after operations, things like that. The next step is regeneration, which is undoing something as if it never happened in the first place. So we've got
Wow.
photos and examples of that in the book as well, because it's important for people to understand what's possible at home at the moment.
And as you said, I mean, it is going ballistic, and so people sort of are hearing these things. And when I hear about vibrations or frequency, we're very much concerned about certain frequencies, EMFs, which are emitted from mobile phones, smart meters, 5G towers, and what have you. And there's this sort of worry, oh, hang on a minute, isn't frequencies and radiation bad for us? But I gather there must be pluses and minuses on that side.
Absolutely. Broadly, what we're talking about is the difference between natural frequencies, resonant frequencies that have an energizing and supportive impact on the body and its whole systems, versus man-made frequencies that are sometimes then very different to that and jarring and disruptive. So they can disrupt the hemoglobin, the DNA, the cellular function and communication, things like that. So the quick answer is that the right frequencies then are things that the body can absorb, use for energy, and also apply to its own communications as well.
And I'm right in thinking that the frequency healing, the good frequencies that we're talking about, the natural frequencies, it is helping the body to do what the body naturally does.
Yes, Absolutely. And much more quickly. So the principle underlying a lot of this is homeostasis, which is the body's ability to regulate itself and maintain its own balance. So the higher some of the things that impede homeostasis are lack of energy, for example. And we don't always notice this. So when we get up sleep deprived early in the morning, when we've got a young child or something like that, then what we don't realize is, our eyes are dry. Our vision's actually constricted. It all ends up a little bit blurry. The colors aren't as rich as normal. But using these technologies, you can very quickly awaken the body from that state, and suddenly your vision's broader. Your eyes have proper moisture and lubrication. The tears are there. And you can also see things in more detail and richer color as well. So the mechanisms that tend to sort of inhibit rapid healing are low energy, but also poor communications. So the quicker the communications and the more energy we've got, the quicker the body, if it's out of balance, can just whack itself back straight into balance. And that has implications for not just healing, but also the progression of disease as well.
Right. And when you say communications, you're talking about the communication between the various things in your body that are communicating and helping the natural process to do what it's got to do.
That's right, because the body's got its own systems built in which counterbalance each other. So one is, for example, the sympathetic nervous system isn't it's got a function, but it's the function of the daytime, quick decision making, fight or flight, things like that. And very often that's out of kilter in modern life because of stress. But at about 2 o'clock in the morning or so, we switch over into the dominance of the parasympathetic nervous system. So these things act in opposition to each other, so the body can always maintain its own balance and shift from one primary mode into another. And at night time, that's typically about regeneration, restoration, healing, etc.
We're in a very fast paced modern society at the moment, and people perhaps we're governed by the clock, by time, an artificial creation, really, for mostly for people to go to work or go to school or do all that. We no longer operate by seasonal time zones, as i.e., going to bed when the sun drops down and getting up earlier in the morning when it rises. That must affect us quite a lot.
It does, but you've also got, different types of personalities who tend to have different rhythms. So your typical introvert will be someone who likes a lot of time on their own, staying up late at night, reading, things like that, and they'll tend to want to get up later in the morning as well. So we have a not a sort of black and white situation when it comes to how the human body or psyche or anything else like that operates. We have sort of like a spectrum of different kinds of behaviors and attributes that we have personal preferences for as well.
So, I mean, if we go right back to sort of basics, the Earth that we're on emits frequencies of its own, a natural frequency. And I mean, somebody sent me a book a while ago about what do they call it now? I've forgotten the term. Where you put your bare feet onto the ground
Grounding,
and you connect with the earth.
yes.
And I suppose at a very primal level, that is a very natural way of getting your natural frequencies.
Yes, absolutely. And reconnecting with the earth. And, sometimes we have low energy in ourselves, excuse me, and we need to get extra sources of energy from places. So we get them in all sorts of different ways. And the further you go down this frequency healing rabbit hole, what you find is, for example, that a healthy gut will produce 100 liters of bioavailable hydrogen a day. So this makes hydrogen therapy, either consuming it in water or even inhaling it, something that gives the body extra energy because that facilitates electron transfer. So that's another sort of quite widely adopted now home health and regenerative technology as well. So there's a whole different set of categories of these kinds of devices, and they all operate in different ways, but generally supporting the body's energy, its communications, and its speed of adaptation. So basically, if you end up with a situation where people are starting to get sick around you, maybe an infection or something like that, you'll find some people it barely touches them at all. Others will have a much stronger, longer kind of response. But if you've got chronic illness, then the cycle of illness itself just can't repeat, it can't complete. So it ends up being stuck and repeating and repeating. And that's what people would tend to call a state of remission when it appears to disappear. But we know through homeopathy, but also through using a whole range of energy healing technologies that, given the right kind of energy and stimulation, the first thing the body's going to do in that situation is create all the symptoms as it wants to fight the illness. So our job, if you like, is to support the natural processes of the body with energy and information, structured energy, if you like, that enables it to do that in record time. And it certainly can. And the results are, quite astounding to a lot of people. So some of the people that I deal with have really had a very tough time. They've tried a lot of different things. I've dealt with things like fibromyalgia and endometriosis. And for them, those kind of people want very, very fast results because it's almost like, the last roll of the dice for them. So the beauty is that with the right kind of technologies, they can have instant, profound improvements and effectively undo all of those symptoms and the process of the illness over a matter of, often weeks, actually, not a very long period.
I suppose that I should have asked right at the beginning to get you to sort of qualify your background, I suppose, and why it is you're able to write a book on frequency healing. So perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, so that we just get that out the way, really.
Sure, yeah. Well, I shot down the rabbit hole probably about, 25 years or so ago now. And but around about 2007, I think it was, I heard about someone who started talking about energy healing technologies and dropping some of the typical sort of buzzwords and memes into the conversation. And this guy had described how he was absolutely bent double. And this was in front of his secretary and he hadn't been able to straighten up. He was in absolute agony, and he was driven to meet someone who gave him a quick brushing on the arm with one of these devices, which is called a scanar from the Russian space medicine program. And then the secretary burst out laughing and said, "You should have seen the look on his face." After 8 minutes, he was just told, "Well, you're done now, straighten up." And he did do. And there he was, and this is very typical with people who experience these technologies, moving around, trying to find, where the pain had disappeared to.
Right.
So after that, I was obviously immediately interested in the device. I went down to meet the person who was dealing with them. I had a treatment. I had nothing wrong with me, but I found that my eyesight was better and a few other sort of interesting little things happened. And then I decided to get a device to take the training, which I think is something that I would absolutely always recommend to people is ask as many questions as you want about your options and what it will do for your particular situation.
Right.
Always get something with training and support, even if it's something very, very simple, apparently not needing any sort of special knowledge, like, tuning forks, for example. And you'll find that there is knowledge that's required for these things, and that will help you to get quicker, better results. But also, if it's good training, it will help you to manage your expectations properly and avoid the pitfalls. So I guess in that period, that's when I started. Since that time, I've treated, my best guess is somewhere between 700 and 900 people. I've used over 20 different modalities, including the very latest devices from the Russian space medicine program. So this is quite an expensive device. Uniquely, it's built in a satellite factory because it's got so many frequencies. It's so highly tuned. It's got so many feedback loops associated with it, but also things like soft lasers, hydrogen therapy, heating blankets, all sorts of things like that. So I've experienced quite a lot. And then a few years ago, I was contacted by someone that I know dealt with, very high-end technology. And this lady said, "We've got a problem. We normally sell our devices within the North American area, but I know that you're familiar with these technologies. We've been approached by a clinic in Geneva. They've just bought a device, but they don't have the time to come over and spend a weekend with us doing our training course. can you deal with them and their list of about 15 or 16 people? They want to get results, obviously, very, very quickly with it. And that sort of developed into a small curriculum. I then trained more clinicians and doctors and people like that. And now I'm the president of an organization called Keep Health. We accumulate this research together. So we've got over 1 million links to studies from various modalities, but including things like nutrition on our website. So we have quite a holistic approach. And we also offer then training and support to what is effectively a private members association, but one that's registered officially to operate internationally with people in terms of providing the equipment. And I think probably even more importantly, the training, the knowledge, the know-how, and the support to use it. Because some people really do have, pretty difficult, challenging stuff to deal with. And you can imagine, if it's one of your loved ones, then you think this is going to help. You probably do a lot of research, and then you want to get results out of it immediately. And suddenly
Mm.
you feel this enormous weight of responsibility on your shoulders. I don't want to cause any problems. I want to get these fast results. Where do I start? So we really support that whole process for not just brand new home users, but through to doctors and clinicians and other people as well. And sometimes, very experienced energy healing practitioners who realize that, maybe there's an edge that I can get for the people that I work with.
When you were describing the chap in his office who was bent double, and
Mm.
they go over with what seems like a miraculous machine, you can't see the waves or the energy, the vibrations, etc. And so therefore, a lot of people may initially be quite skeptical because, again, we're told these things work,
Mm.
but we're so used to actually having practical things. If you put a plaster on somebody who's bleeding, you go, oh yeah, it stopped the bleeding, now
Yeah.
I'm not cured, but the healing process is happening. Do you get that the skepticism from people occurring quite a bit initially?
Oh, very much. And I love treating skeptics. Well, the beauty is I've been fortunate enough to find a number of modalities that work very, very effectively in a very high percentage of cases and extremely quickly. So I would expect in most situations to get that kind of stunned response where people start moving around going, where's the pain gone? And at that
Yes.
point, there's kind of like a psychological opening event going on with them, which is, okay, I know I didn't believe this, but now I do. And so, because the placebo effect doesn't happen on animals, and it's about the explanation is that's about belief. So someone who doesn't believe it wouldn't expect to get results, but suddenly their worldview has changed. Ah, there are things out there that I never realized could help me in that situation. And the beauty is it can happen very, very quickly in minutes, often with these technologies. And that's great. Now, some things you won't feel necessarily, like the lasers and things like that, but you'll know when your pain has gone. And one of the things about this area is that these various modalities also have their very different and sometimes opposite rules of application. So it's very easy then for someone who's jumped into something, found a good device or an app or something like that, got some good results, then to say, well, I know about frequency healing. It all works this way, and it doesn't necessarily. And
Right.
there's a whole load of other then sort of unasked questions which become really important. So tolerance, which is where the body switches off to frequencies and what used to work no longer works, or healing crises, which can be potentially very dangerous because a healing crisis is back to that cycle of illness kind of situation where the underlying issues are brought to the surface in remission, for example. So you want to be quite careful about that, because even if someone's a typical sort of question, naive question is, what's the frequency for schizophrenia? Well, even if it works, you don't necessarily want to be in that situation with someone who's now going through a severe episode of schizophrenia as part of their healing process. So we need to sort of think quite carefully about things like this. Um, Tolerance, healing crises, the dosage. how much does that individual need in that particular situation at that particular time? The treatment interval, all of these sorts of things come in. Because even if you end up with a mild kind of healing crisis, no one wants to have flu-like symptoms for a few days. So there's a fair bit unsaid and unasked under the surface, really, which is quite important to go into and to consider.
So I suppose you can go and buy things over the counter, but if you don't have the training, as you said, or a consultant to talk to, or a practitioner, I suppose, to be able to get guidance, you could overuse these things, or just find they're no longer working as you might have expected.
Oh yeah, if it's a powerful healing modality, then yeah, you could easily have a healing crisis occurring. I got
Right.
to someone wrote to me recently who bought the book, and this lady's a body worker, so she works with bodily energy with her hands and things like that, and but also with devices. And she said, you know, she wished she had the book years ago because it would have saved her thousands in equipment that didn't actually do what she wanted and hoped that it would do for herself. So hopefully it's got something in there, for anyone who's interested in the area, really, including the practitioners who go, what's my next best step for what I want to deal with.
Right. So, I mean, clearly, then there's an understanding of this technology that needs to take place. It's not just you buy this and you're done and away you go, because clearly there's a plethora of different potentials that you can use, and if you're using the wrong one, as you say, you may get these flu-like symptoms and then say, well, the bloody thing's not working. It's actually made me feel a lot worse.
Exactly. Yeah, this is one of the things, if you're potentially going to get those effects and you're treating someone with a chronic illness, if you don't know about that, then they go, your device has brought my illness back or it's made it worse. So, we have sort of certain strategies and tactics and techniques for dealing with that kind of situation. But the simplest is to say, okay, you're in remission at the moment. Come and see me when your body's actually aware that it's got this problem and sufficient energy and already up and running and wanting to fight it, because we need to push it through that area as quickly as possible.
In your book, right at the beginning, as you alluded to earlier on, you have some examples, some quite amazing examples
Yeah.
of before and after pictures of quite horrific problems that people have got, and especially where the skin. You've got one. I'm just looking at it here. You probably can't see it, and I should have maybe taken some screenshots or something to play in. But skin being repaired incredibly rapidly, and bones, it seems, being moved, and this chap with a horrendous black eye that is coming back, all sorts of things which, when you open the book, oh my god, that's awful, and then you see that within a few hours or a couple of days the healing process is really well underway, which would take weeks otherwise. um, so in those sort of dire circumstances, you can see that there's an immediate need. But what about if you're just at the very beginning of some form of illness or discomfort?
Mm.
Presumably, the early intervention is much better than waiting for the body to sort of collapse.
Yeah. Well, early and late are good opportunities to intervene, actually, and there's a rationale for this. So there's a lot of sort of strange inversions in energy healing. Um, so yeah, the sooner we can get to something and treat it, the better. In fact, there's an acupoint between the top of the shoulder blade and the spine, and this is supposed to stop colds and flu in their tracks. So I tried this out a few years ago. Everyone was going down with something, you get that sort of itchy, peppery feeling in the nose.
Yes.
All right, it's on the way. Well, I used this, first generation scalar, parked it on that point and treated for a few minutes. That went away and nothing ever developed at all. Conversely, there was a situation in Liverpool a few years ago. So there's a massage technique you can do with this as well, by plugging in these things known as probes, and especially, so you can deal with improving IQ, stress, trauma, all sorts of things like that. But this is a great one for stress relief. And so I was there meeting up with an old friend. We were talking about law in those days. And he said, "Oh, have you got your, little device on you?" So I gave him this quick neck and shoulders massage in the pub. And one of his friends said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, this is a an energy healing device from the Russian space medicine program." And he almost just pushed his friend out of the chair and said, "I want to go on that." So I'm presented with this situation of a guy who wants something, who is just saying, "Look, get on with it," kind of thing. What
Mm.
technique we can use with this, which is called arm brushing, where we're actually looking for stickiness in the arm, which is the reflected inflammation of nerves from all around the body. Actually, it's all reflected all around the body. So I gave him this technique, which was called an arm brushing, for about 8 minutes, and he started to get very excited. And eventually, I had to tell him to calm down. And then at the end of it, I said, "Okay, so what was going on?" And he said, "Well, um, my leg feels better." And I said, "Well, okay, how did your leg feel before?" "Numb and tingly." "Do you know why it felt numb and tingly?" "Yeah, I broke my back." "When did you break your back?" 28 years ago. And I said, "You mean to tell me that you can feel your leg properly for the first time in 28 years after under 10 minutes treatment with this device?" And he said, "Yeah. And I can't wait to go home tonight and jump in the bath, because every time I've jumped in the bath for like 28 years, I've had this very sharp electric shock from my leg." Well,
Oh
very
gosh.
often you don't see these people again, and you don't want to make too many assumptions. This is one thing I'm quite keen on. So
Mm.
I spoke to his friend a few years later, and I said, "You remember this incident?" He said, "Yeah, how could I forget?" He was almost pushing me out of the chair. And I said, "Well, did it solve his problem?" And he said, "Yeah." So lingering things where the body's actually been making a lot of efforts over a long time to try and resolve them, then this final little bit of energy and information can bridge that gap. And then suddenly you can get, results that most people would consider to be miraculous under the circumstances. So early and late in treatment are two, particular sweet spots, if you like, for getting very dramatic results.
People often put up, I mean, the human body is an amazingly resilient thing, and people put up with all sorts of aches and pains
Mm.
and just think, oh, well, that's the way it is. I'm getting old. Or I nudged this elbow, and now every time I lift up here, I get this. And people put up with stuff, and very often they don't really know that their body is suffering because they've got so used to it and they've blanked out
Yeah.
these symptoms, as it were. Um, and presumably, then it's quite good to come and see somebody like you, or to have one of these machines and do a regular checkup and actually go, oh my goodness, I've freed up certain parts of my body, or I never knew I had a blocked nose. I just thought it was just something in the air, and things get better.
Yeah.
Would you recommend that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then, when we sort of jump down the rabbit hole, though, it's good to sort of survey the landscape of what's possible. So, two completely opposite in a way things came out of the Russian space medicine program. And this needs putting into context, because by far it was the biggest, most consistent effort into developing frequency healing technologies. And the rationale for it is, well, if you take pills and potions in space, it's coming out in the water. And guess what we're drinking? So,
Yes.
in order to take that level of contamination out, you need bigger and heavier products taking up more space, and that's a lot of money with space. So the Russians put $100 million into this, and over 1,000 of their top scientists and engineers for a decade. And I worked it out recently because I was trying to sort of compare what were the Americans earning in those days, etc. So this is probably the equivalent of $5 billion worth of investment. But out of this came three things. One was a healing blanket, which helps to keep out extraneous disturbing energy, but also wraps in and amplifies your own biofield. But then you've got these two very opposite sort of approaches. One is now known as bioresonance diagnostics, which sends frequencies into the body and detects viruses, parasites, bacteria, and fungi. And then, like an opera singer singing a note, shatters those things. But as Reich found out with his technologies, people can die because of that, because they're overwhelmed by toxic overload when he was treating cancer patients. So they play other frequencies to support the digestive system, the endocrine system, etc., to dispose of those items quickly. But then you get these completely opposite things, which are not doing anything like that at all. What they're doing is they're just simply putting in resonant frequencies into the body frequencies the body uses for its own energy and its own communications. But also they're stimulating improved responses from the body as well. So this effectively is helping the body just to sort itself out and to work out, everything it wants to deal with, from injuries through to chronic illnesses and things like that as well. So effectively, that's a completely non-diagnostic methodology. But its uniqueness now, in terms of its latest form, is this fact that it's built in a satellite factory, and this hyper-tuned, very, very broad range of frequencies that creates not just energy healing, but regenerative effects. So there's a sort of really quite a wide array of things that are possible, and they all tend to have their own, particular rules associated with them as well.
And when I was talking to John White from Spooky 2, his scalar energy device, he said, it's not just for those healing events that you think of where people have broken a limb or cut something or they've got headaches and things, but very much in terms of raising your mood or helping you sleep. A lot of people, obviously, in this modern, fast-paced and slightly worrying world, can't always get to sleep. And presumably then the energy and the vibrations from that can help you to relax, change your mood so that you're a little bit upbeat and perhaps more creative, but also, importantly, that you get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is important as well. I mean, it's hell, isn't it? 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning when you get some sleep.
Yes.
But yeah, this is explained in the book as well. We've got specific acupoints for metabolism and weight loss, for stress relief and emotional issues and things like that, energy, sports recovery, things like that. So there are various different ways that we can approach this. But some of the things that some people very high up in the order of things are quite aware of some of the potential of these technologies. So we know that top business people, top sports people are applying this to improve their business performance, their creativity, their IQ. One photograph that really moved me, I put right at the front of this book, which is a girl who had, I don't know if I can show you this, a very
Oh, yes, there we go.
traumatic brain injury. And I was, almost moved to tears looking at this, because this is the impact after 12 minutes. Um,
12 minutes, yes.
so using these technologies, including brain training, can actually permanently increase your IQ by 10%. But in a case like that, it can improve it by 30% or more. So this can have, really profound impacts on people's lives. So, top sports people are using it because um, obviously it's not just about more energy, but the quicker you can compute where that ball's coming to and where you're going to kick it and how the other players are moving on the pitch, etc., gives you, potentially quite a decisive edge in that kind of situation. So there are really broad applications for frequencies improving very, very wide areas of human life, not just health, um, intellectual performance, all that sort of stuff as well. Yeah, stress, as you mentioned.
Yes. Now, we've been mostly talking about the gadgets that you can do, which will be emitting this energy and tuned to the right frequencies, etc.
Mm.
And at the beginning, I was talking about sound baths and
Yeah.
the bells and things. Are there more just sort of basic natural ones that people can utilize without necessarily having to have an electronic device
Oh, yes.
that produces the good natural frequencies that they can
Yeah.
just to enhance a little bit of their life?
Definitely. So people are using bells, they're using sound bowls. Um, I particularly like the idea of tuning forks, because those people are just making something to make that particular sound. There are various ones that you can use. But with all of this, I'd always get some kind of a training with it. And that almost sounds stupid. Why do you need training to use a tuning fork or a bowl or something like that? Um, but there's sort of trade secrets, if you like, that not everybody knows in this situation. And, as we covered earlier, it's easier to overdo it. Some things you can't overdo. The automated devices that I work with, it's as much as you want, whenever you want, wherever you want. But if you overtreat with a laser, for example, which is just a light device, then what can happen there is you can start off with, say, pain of 8 or 9 out of 10. It can go away during the treatment and very rapidly. But if you overtreat, then it's like the body gets overloaded and all the symptoms come back again, including that pain. But now your comparative benchmark is not the 8 or 9 out of 10 that you started with. It's going from 0 to 8 or 9 very quickly. So you can feel worse than when you started. And all the positive effects in that case can be actually undone. There's quite a number of studies on this kind of thing. So understanding the sweet spot, not doing too much, if necessary, just doing a little bit regularly, and seeing how you feel with things. And then if you want to push it, people naturally like to experiment. Okay,
Mm.
do it all night if you want to, and then see what happens. So you can treat it as a learning experience, but there's a sort of combination that comes in here, which is not just about the frequency, but the amount of energy as well that the body actually requires in that situation. So this is where people are providing things like training for tuning forks. I like them. They're very convenient. You can pretty much carry them anywhere. I like the equipment I've got for the same reason. You don't need to have a room stacked with stuff. You can easily carry it. I put mine in my little backpack when I'm going abroad, and I've got my home healing kit, you know, anywhere and everywhere I want it, which is great.
So the tuning forks, presumably you could get a range of different frequencies from different tuning forks depending on. So
Yeah.
you wouldn't be picking just one tuning fork and think this does a myriad of different things, because it's really only going to give you one set of vibrations, presumably, unless you hit it in different areas, I imagine.
Well, no, it's always giving out the same frequency, and it should be
Right,
accurate as well. But then, I think the art comes with where to apply it, how much and how often,
right.
and does, you know, 369 hertz create um, the same impact as something that's tuned to 111 hertz or something. And that's really where, I then, I often give answers, which is, I don't know.
Mm.
Then hypothesize about things, but I don't know about that. And that's where I would, find someone who is offering that training, because they should know. And they should give you that information and that guidance, and also support afterwards if needed, if you get any, unexpected situations to deal with, or potentially, some unexpected responses in other situations. So I can't sort of speak too much on that. But that's the way I would do it personally. I would make a budget accordingly, and I'd get the training and support to go along with it.
So really, if people are thinking, "Hey, this sounds absolutely brilliant. I've got this pain or recurring problem or potential problem, whatever it might be," then really rather than just go online, find something that says frequency healing device and go, "Oh yeah, I'll buy that. It may be £300 or £400," and just investing something which could be completely inappropriate. They need to talk to somebody to get at least some advice and indeed some training on how to use it, when to use it, etc. That, I imagine, is the sensible procedure.
Absolutely. And this is one of the sort of key principles of the book, which is, well, here are some great questions to ask. Um, and using those questions, you can start to define more clearly what you want. Do I want an energy healing device? Do I want something that's regenerative? What are my options? Okay, what are some really good questions to ask the providers of those technologies? And then I can make a really well-informed choice with good expectations as to that should do the job for me. Um, so yeah, that's the intention, is really empowering people with some good basic information and much better questions to ask.
And a lot of people, of course, will have naturally gone to a GP, been prescribed various things, or gone on to the hospital and be in the process of some, let's call it conventional treatment for the sake of argument. And can they use the healing frequency devices at the same time, or would they be advised to ditch the pharmaceuticals or whatever the other treatment is, and then just solely stick with the healing treatment.
That's an it depends question,
Yes.
or answer.
I thought it might. I mean, I thought it might be, but I'm trying to ask the questions that viewers might be thinking. Oh, I'll just stop. I'll stop taking the medication and buy something, and then I'm going to be good.
They are.
And that,
Yeah, sorry, Richard. That's
yeah,
it is a great question. It's a very fair question. So, for example, my understanding is that hydrogen therapy, for example, because it's providing electrons to all of the cells of the body, tends to make pharmaceuticals and other things that you're taking more effective. So you probably wouldn't want to do that in that situation, or you'd want to throttle things down or transition into that maybe. Whereas
yeah.
so I'm living in Austria here, and it can get a bit cold during the winter. I slipped on some icy stone steps a few years ago, and I shattered 5 ribs.
Oh
What I
gosh.
mean by that is that I punctured a lung and all sorts of other stuff. But basically, it was like looking at the end of Christmas crackers. With these little bits in the middle, which were all skewed off at one angle. It wasn't a pleasant experience. But I took my ENS and my laser into the hospital, and I was coming off the painkillers within 24 hours. So the nurses were coming around with their trolley and saying, do you want your Schmerz tablet? And I was going, no, thanks, I don't have any pain.
I have no pain. I have no need. And they must have been quite surprised.
They were looking at me as if I was completely barking mad, actually.
Yes.
But the at the end of that sort of process, 5 weeks later, I had the sort of final X-ray. And normally, what happens is when a bone heals, you end up with this lump around it called a callus. And what you saw in my case was these nice little smooth little train tracks all going along merrily. And the doctor looked at that and scratched his head and said, yeah, that's an old injury. He had no idea of what he was looking at. So you can combine certain technologies in certain situations and just get far superior results. So in that case, I was, coming off the meds in record time, but not having, all of the associated nightmarish pain and sleepless nights and stuff like that. In fact, it was the opposite, because what often happens with this technology is that your body, when it's in a crisis, it wants to go into its parasympathetic healing and regenerative mode. I was sleeping about 14 or 15 hours a day, getting up, pootling around, having some food, etc. All right, pain starting again, treating myself again. Now I feel sleepy, off to bed again. So, yeah, this is where, a slightly sort of deeper insight into how does this stuff work then can help you from getting into trouble, but also help you to get really good results in a situation like that.
How is the technology, this new technology, accepted that it is old technology in a way, but that we're rediscovering it, as it were, being accepted or not by the conventional practitioners?
Mm, that's a great question. I mean, I certainly know of some doctors who've been, involved in COVID whistleblowing and things like that, and unfortunately are completely closed to this apparently, because you would think, well, you're in medicine, you want to help people, you want to
Mm.
get great results and stuff like that, but it's just a step too far, I think. And that's again, it's partly why I stuffed the book, squirreled away all these different examples and X-rays and photos and stuff, so that people like that can look at it, and then they're going to jump onto PubMed, the US Department of Health website, and start, searching things and finding, all right, well, there's some evidence for this as well, and thousands, tens of thousands of studies in some cases. So, yeah, bringing it to people's awareness is really important. The medical profession generally has a shocking level of ignorance of, even things that I'd consider to be very, very basic, like supplements, uh,
Right.
and their impact on the body. This is being covered in the second book, Frequency Healing 2, an inspired, another inspired title, if you like. But that's going into more of these holistic sort of approaches, and how to identify quality supplements and colloidal silver and other things like that, dosages.
Yes.
But the doctors have really almost no awareness of the importance of supplements. They're certainly, and never appear to be prescribing zinc and quercetin, which is an important cofactor known as an ionophore for helping the zinc to actually get into your cells, which is what you
Yes.
want it to be. Um, so, and as for the energy healing technologies, very few of them have heard of things like even soft lasers, or only very, very vaguely in the periphery of things, and really have no appreciation of the fact that, hang on, I think the last time I looked, there was certainly over 10,000 studies there demonstrating a wide variety of regenerative effects, um, stimulating all sorts of impacts on the body. So they're pretty lagging in this area, and that's what I'm perceiving, is that actually that and iatrogenesis, which is death by medicine, death by drugs and things like that, by medical intervention,
Yes.
then is really spurring the public to do it for themselves. And this is where I think it is really important for people to ask better questions and have a deeper understanding, so they don't get themselves into trouble with this, and they do get the results that they really want, and ideally in record time. So the medical profession is quite stuck in this area, I think, at the moment.
Yes. I mean, when anybody who goes to their GP very rarely, sorry, my earpiece just fell out. Very rarely gets asked about diet, which, you are what you eat. And as you mentioned, supplements and nutrients and things, if you're not getting those into the body, how is the body supposed to heal itself? If you're not getting the right things into it. And it does surprise me that they really only deal with symptoms and not looking at causes in any great detail. But we do know, of course, that there is financial interests in little white pills rather than perhaps the newer technology. And that's a different story for a different day.
Absolutely. And don't think it's just, us saying this either, Richard, because there's some quotes in the book by the editor of the British Medical Journal and the New England Medical Journal as well. And those quotes by those very esteemed authorities of medicine are devastating for medicine as a whole, and for a lot of the clinical studies. The oldest trick is you do so many studies, and all the ones where the results aren't in favor of what you want to demonstrate, they just get forgotten, buried,
Yeah.
and not published. So there's really quite deep institutional bias, and the doctors, I know that they're there for a reason. I know that they're trying their best, but if they're not presented with accessible, reliable, high quality information, then the medical profession is judging itself, and from a high level, from those people, and what they've got to say is quite an eye opener, I think.
And do you get judged as being a quack because you're dealing in something which they really have no notion?
Um, I try and avoid most conversations with
Yeah, well, that's
uh,
probably good advice, isn't
when
it?
when it comes to this kind of thing. If they want to know, then generally they're asking quite probing questions. They want to play devil's advocate, and I then point them to, the evidence. Now I'd point them to the book and say, well, read it for yourself, but also go to our website, because it's, there's a massive information there that's already there from, many countries around the world, dealing with all sorts of frequency devices. And you should be asking yourself some important questions as well, which is, okay, so
Mm.
soft lasers have been around since the 1980s with
Wow.
plethora of effects.
Yes.
Um, why don't I know about this? Why
Well, I was just going to say we don't know. We don't know about this technology at all.
they don't
It's
know?
not mainstream, is it?
No. And if you don't know, you're not, it's then even more challenging to ask the right questions, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and some people are, sadly going to their grave, or in long-term pain by not knowing that there is an answer for them, because they just don't know what questions to ask, and the doctors are ignorant as well,
Yeah.
and that's obviously a sad situation. But I mean, I think we're in a fascinating time at the moment, because this is a burgeoning technology that is now, thanks to the internet and interviews and this, we're getting the message out, and people are able to experience it for themselves.
Mm.
And also, I think you mentioned a few minutes ago about the importance of the patient being in the knowledge, and taking the responsibility back so that they can ask those questions,
Yeah.
which is very empowering for people. rather than just relying on somebody who's come out of medical school and is very knowledgeable in what they've been trained to be knowledgeable in, particularly if it's associated with the pharmaceutical industry, and you just rely that the doctor is going to give you the right medicines and things. Even 20 years later, you're still taking a tablet, you haven't a clue what it does. Whereas if you are briefed in this new technology and you can ask these questions and effectively buy a device and try it yourself, or go to a practitioner who can give you the training, I think we're in a wonderful time where what you're talking about, we're going to see so much more.
Yeah, and I think, the doctors, there are doctors that I deal with. I train doctors, and surgeons and dentists and people like that. And, you know, they're great. Those people are absolutely great. They're wide awake. They are thirsty for this information. And it's a, for them in particular, it's such an empowering thing. They're thrilled.
Mm.
They find, I mean, psychologists as well, using these things for autism and stuff like that. They're thrilled that, sometimes very, very serious problems for people can be resolved and they can do it as well. So, this is not rocket science. There's stuff to learn for sure. But the beauty of these technologies is they are very, very safe. They're very easy to use. There is stuff that you need to learn, but if you do things in the right way, then often there's a really good chance that you can get a great result in record time. And so, that should be a very joyful experience for people, whether they're just normal people like you and I, or they're, trained medical professionals.
I mean, it does seem all very science fiction, doesn't it? And when you then look at places like the NHS, it seems now very medieval in its approach.
Yeah,
And that's good, because we do have to move on and move with the times. And if there's a technology, and let's face it, doctors who train to be doctors, or people who train to be doctors, initially when they started training, they had presumably the urge to help people. And if you're able to do it rapidly, cleanly, with a safe technology,
yeah,
it's heartening for the doctor to be able to say to the patient, yeah, there you are, you'll be fine. Whereas it's a bit touch and go with the current system that we have, he
absolutely.
says.
Yeah,
And trust in the current system, thanks to the COVID debacle,
mm,
has really tested what they do. And so I think people are more anxious to look and find something, more open to look and find something, I should say, a new technology, which perhaps in the past they wouldn't have been.
yeah, and I think, to be fair about this as well, um, I spoke to a very, very good doctor last year sometime, and he said to me, "Do you realize if you take three too many paracetamol in a day, you're dead?" And I went, "What?"
Wow.
And he said, "Yeah, that is enough to destroy your liver." He said, "I've seen people as the house doctor, the house consultant in hospitals in London, where, teenage girls have done that for
Gosh.
period pains, and then they have, sorry, you're on the transplant list. That's it." So,
Blimey.
this is, and to me, that was an especially shocking sort of example, because everyone knows paracetamol. Everyone
Yeah.
has assumptions about paracetamol. Everyone's probably taken paracetamol, but this is how dangerous it gets. And then it's even more dangerous if you start to take it with other types of painkillers. If you've run out, for example, or you feel that some, cocktailing is in order.
Yes, and they often say, "Oh, take a couple of paracetamol," and it's like a very simple thing that everybody thinks is safe,
Yeah,
and then it may not be. Time is running out. It's amazing how we can have these conversations on the channel and talk to fascinating people about fascinating subjects. So your book is readily available. It's up now, and you've got another one coming, which sounds great. Presumably, it's available from all good bookshops, as they say, online, or is it available from you only?
only Amazon. Um,
Only Amazon.
the publishing issue is a really big one, even for Amazon. That's a 270-page book, full color, because I felt it's really important to have the graphics and the.
Absolutely. I mean, it does. You've got good pictures in there, and it isn't. It might be technical in places, but it's a good read. It's an easy. I mean, it's an easy read. You don't have to be a professional to be able to understand it. which and it is beautifully illustrated.
So there's a sort of price floor under it, if you like, even as a Kindle book, which I never had any idea about when I started, which is, well, they charge you for the download. So,
Right.
I think it's like, something like $30 or something before there's any sort of break even point on this book. And then after that, I get 30% or something. So, but the next one's going to be thinner, cheaper, and black and white. So,
Well, that's the thing, but I mean, this will give you the right questions to ask,
mm.
and inform you enough on frequency healing, so it can as a baseline, I suppose.
And I think, I've tried my best to be very fair and neutral as well. It's not in my, nature or interest to knock different products or different approaches. So, hopefully, as I said, everyone's got a different situation, everyone's got different budgets. But I'm anticipating that people are going to be asking a lot more difficult questions in future. I think walking away with a much more satisfactory result financially or um,
And healthily as well.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because you can't. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't put a price on your health. It's not when you're feeling well, you take it for granted, don't you? You just think, oh yeah, and then you pull a muscle in your back and you're hobbling around, going, goodness, I can't go up the stairs now without severe pain.
Well, this is one of the ironies, Richard, is people will spend an absolute ton on their animals and their pets, on their wrinkles, because cosmetology is covered in here
Yes.
as well. But then when you've got a problem, then you suddenly realize the value of your health and living pain-free and think clearly and move easily and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I think then that starts to become something that's very important as we become more aware of that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us about frequency healing. I think we're going to hear a lot more of that subject going into the future as more and more people start to become aware of it and will want to ask questions and the whole scope of the different things. It's not just for broken bones or a dodgy elbow or maybe a bit of tinnitus. There's all the other things that we've described. Just your natural well-being, which everybody needs, especially in this very busy and radiating world that we do find ourselves in. Frequency healing, Michael Upstone, available on Amazon, and do check it out. I'll put a link in the description so that you can go straight there, of course. But I hope you sell many of them. Thank you so much, Michael. It's been a joy to talk to you.
And I'll make a one last very, very quick plea, and that is
Of course.
anyone who buys this any new book has to fight the Amazon algorithm.
Oh,
If
yes.
you buy it and you like it, or you don't like it, whatever, you've got an opinion, please share it. So if you rate the book and review it, then this is really, really important, especially in the early days. And it's been designed to be a useful book for people. So if you do that, I'd be extremely grateful.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. You've been told what to do, so do it. But this is it. I mean, it is very hard these days. It's so easy for people to self-publish now and what have you. And getting your book, when it's an important book and useful to people, it's very hard to get that across the algorithm. As it is with YouTube videos, believe me, we have the same problem here. And like all these big corporations, they are a bit protective what goes out. So. It is a fight. But anyway, if the audience can do that, you can like and subscribe to the channel as well whilst you're there. But Michael, brilliant to talk to you. Thank you so much for sparing the time. I'm sure a lot of people got a lot out of that. Link in the description. And I'll be back with more monologues and more wonderful interviews in due course. But from Michael and I, thank you for watching. Till next time, goodbye.
Thank you, Richard.